A wolf pup hit the floor of a kitchen, wet and shivering and bleeding from the side. Something large and silver had carried it there in its jaws. The mother of the pup was not in the room. She was nowhere on the mountain. A woman dropped to her knees on the cold stone and wrapped both hands around the small ribcage. Her fingers were already wet with blood that wasn't hers. The silver wolf did not move. It watched her. It waited. Outside, in the trees, 3 more sets of yellow eyes were watching too. Her name was Mira, and she did not look up. She did not ask where the pup came from. She did not ask who sent it. This was the 3rd pup brought to her door that month. What none of them knew yet was who would come next. Stay with me on this one. She had been alone on the mountain for 9 winters. The cottage sat on a high ridge of stone, above the tree line where the village goats wouldn't climb. There were no neighbors. There were no roads. There was a footpath that took half a day to walk down to the village below, and Mira walked it only when she needed salt or thread or something the mountain wouldn't give her. She made everything else herself. She made tinctures from yarrow and bitter root and the white flowers that grew between the stones in spring. She set bones. She delivered babies. The women in the village would send a boy up the path with a folded piece of cloth tied to a stick, and that was how she knew a labor had started. She would come down. She would do what needed doing. She would walk back up before dawn. That was her life. That was the whole of it. She had a wooden chest at the foot of her bed that had belonged to her grandmother. Inside it were 43 small bottles, each one labeled in a careful, slanted hand that wasn't Myra's. Her grandmother had been the healer before her. Her grandmother had taught her every plant on this mountain by the age of 9. Her grandmother had died in this cottage with Mira holding her hand, and Mira had carried her body down the path alone, because there had been no one to help. That was 8 winters ago. She had been keeping the chest filled ever since. Now here's the thing. People in the village said the mountain was wrong. They said it had always been wrong. They said her grandmother had been wrong too, living up there alone, taking things from the forest that didn't belong to a person. Mira had heard it all her life. She had stopped listening to it the year she turned 17. The wolves had been part of the mountain long before she was. She would see them sometimes, in winter, crossing the snowfields below her windows. They never came close. They had their own paths, and she had hers, and for 9 winters that had been the agreement. Then, in autumn, the agreement changed. The first pup arrived on a night so cold the door froze shut. Mira had to put her shoulder against it to push it open, and when she did, she nearly stepped on him. A black-furred thing no bigger than her 2 hands. Half dead. Steam coming off his small body in the firelight from inside. A black wolf stood 20 paces from the door, watching. It did not snarl. It did not move. It waited. Mira picked the pup up. She closed the door. She fed him goat's milk through a folded cloth, drop by drop, for the rest of the night. By morning he was breathing properly. By the 3rd morning he was eating from her hand. She called him Anya, which had been her grandmother's name. The black wolf did not come back. 2 weeks later, a second pup. Gray this time, smaller. A different wolf brought this one. A leaner one with a torn ear. The wolf set the pup down on her step, looked at her once, and walked back into the trees. Mira took the pup in. She called him Tomas, because her grandfather had been Tomas. The pup had a deep cut across his chest that took 6 days to close. She closed it. She fed him too. She did not ask why this was happening. Believe me, she thought about it. She wasn't stupid. She knew that wild wolves do not bring their pups to humans. She knew that something on the mountain was killing the mothers of these pups, because pups don't arrive at a stranger's door unless the ones who were supposed to feed them are gone. She knew the village would have an explanation, and the explanation would involve a word the priest used in his Sunday warnings. She did not want to think about that word. She thought about the pups instead. By the time the 3rd pup arrived, the silver wolf at her door and the small bleeding ribcage in her hands, Anya was the size of a house cat and Tomas was learning to chew on the leg of her stool. Her cottage smelled of milk and damp fur and pine smoke. There were 3 bowls by the fire instead of 1. The villagers had stopped sending boys up with cloths. The priest had started crossing himself when he heard her name. She did not care about any of that. She only cared that the small thing in her hands was breathing, and that the silver wolf was waiting outside in the dark to see whether she would say yes again. She said yes again. That was who she was. The 4th pup came at dawn 3 days later. A wolf with a torn flank brought it. The pup had a single deep wound across its throat that was already closing, but the blood that streaked the silver fur of its mother, and Mira understood, as soon as she saw it, that this had been the mother, not just another wolf, was too dark. Too dark to be wolf blood. Too dark for any blood she knew. She took the pup. She did what she always did. She fed it. She named it Lev. She did not ask the mother to come inside, but she set out a bowl of water on her step that night, and in the morning the bowl was empty, and the silver wolf was gone. The 5th pup came the following week. By then there was no pretending the cottage was a cottage in the ordinary sense. Anya had grown to the size of a small dog. Tomas could open the door if it wasn't latched. The newest pup, Lev, slept in a basket by the hearth, and the new one, a brindled female Mira called Sasha, slept curled against him with her small jaw resting on his shoulder. For pups, for wolves alive and growing under her roof, the mountain had stopped feeling like a quiet place. That was when the priest came up the path. He was an old man named Father Andre. He had buried Myra's grandmother. He had baptized Mira in the village stream when she was a baby. He was, in his own clumsy way, the closest thing to family she had. He arrived at her gate with his cassock muddy to the knees and a leather pouch at his hip, and he stood there for a long moment before he knocked. Mira opened the door. Behind her, the 4 pups went still. They had never seen another human in this cottage before. Anya, the oldest, lowered his head and showed his teeth, but he did not growl. He waited for Myra's word. "Father," she said. "Child, come in." "I won't." He looked past her, into the warm room behind, and his face did a small thing she had never seen it do before. It softened. Then it hardened. "I came to ask you to stop." "Stop what?" "Taking them in." She didn't say anything. He took a breath. "Mira, I will speak plainly. There is something on this mountain that has been killing the mothers of those pups. Do you understand me? The mothers. I understand. It is not a bear. It is not a hunter. It is not a sickness. I know. You know. Father, I'm not a child. I know what feeds up here. I have always known. My grandmother knew. She wrote about it in her chest. She drew a picture of it once. She told me when I was 11 years old. And she warned you to stay away from it. She did. Then why? Mira looked back into the cottage. Lev was watching her from his basket. The little brindled female had crawled half out of hers and was staring up at the priest with eyes that had not yet learned to be afraid of anything. "Because they're little," she said. "And they're alone." Father Andre closed his eyes. He stood there for a long time with his eyes closed. Then he reached into the leather pouch at his hip and took out a small silver pendant on a leather cord. He held it out to her. "Wear this." "No. Mira. I won't wear something against him." Him. She had not meant to say that. She had not even meant to think it. But she had said it, and the words stood between them now on the stone of her doorstep, and both of them knew what it meant. The priest's hand began to shake. The silver pendant trembled against his palm. "You have been speaking to him?" he said. "No. I have never seen him. I do not know his name. I do not know his face. I only know that something on this mountain has decided that what I do here is allowed, and I will not insult that thing by wearing silver on my throat. Mira, he is not a thing that allows. He has so far." The old man looked at her, truly looked at her, the kind of look people give when they are saying goodbye and pretending they aren't. If he comes, Father André said, you will have no defense at all. I won't need one. You think that because you are young. I think that because he has been sending me his wolves' children for 3 months, and he has not once come himself. If he wanted to harm me, Father, he would have done it already. He doesn't want to harm me. He wants to know what I'm going to do with them, so I'm going to keep doing it. That is my answer. Father André put the pendant back into his pouch. He blessed her anyway. He made the sign over her forehead with his thumb, and his thumb was rough and warm, and Mira closed her eyes for it the way she had closed her eyes for her grandmother's hand. Then he turned and walked back down the path, and his cassock moved in the wind, and she watched him go until he was a black mark on the gray switchbacks, and then he wasn't anything at all. She closed the door. She latched it. She walked back into the warm part of her cottage and sat down on the stool by the fire. Anya came and put his head against her knee. Tomas climbed up onto the bench beside her. Lev and Sasha slept on, the way puppies sleep, with their small chests rising and falling in the same rhythm. The kettle was already on. Mira poured herself water. She tore a piece of bread off the loaf she had baked that morning. She ate it slowly. The room smelled of pine smoke and warm fur and the time she had bundled and hung from the rafters in summer. It was, she thought, the quietest evening she had had in weeks. Nothing moved outside. Nothing was going to move outside. The priest had said his piece. The wolves were settled. The pups were breathing. Mira leaned her back against the stone wall behind the stool, and she let herself, for the first time in 3 months, close her eyes. The door opened. She had latched it. She had latched it with her own 2 hands. She had felt the iron drop into the iron. And the door opened anyway, slow and quiet, as if it had been latched by no one at all. The pups did not wake. Not one of them. Anya, who had snarled at the priest from across the room, did not even lift his head. The fire did not flicker. The air in the room did not change. A man stepped inside. He was tall. Not unnaturally tall, but tall enough that he had to dip his head slightly under her lintel. He wore a long dark coat that did not seem to have moved in the wind. His hair was black. His face was pale, the kind of pale you only see on something that doesn't go in the sun. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they fixed on her the moment he was through the door. He closed it behind himself. Mira did not stand up. She had decided, somewhere in the last 3 months, that whatever was coming for her she would meet sitting down. So she sat. The bread was still in her hand. She set it down on the bench beside her. She put both palms flat on her knees. "You came," she said. The man tilted his head, as if she had said something he did not know how to parse. "You knew I would," he said. "I thought you might. And you opened the door anyway." "I didn't open the door. You did." He looked at the latch, then back at her. There was a long moment when he simply stood in her cottage and looked at her, and his face did not show anything Mira could read. "What are you doing here?" he said at last. "Sitting. With my wolves." "Yes. Why?" Mira looked at the pups. Lev was still curled against Sasha. Tomas had rolled in his sleep and his small paw was hanging off the bench. Anya had finally lifted his head, but he was looking at the man with the same calm, patient attention with which he watched Mira herself. Not afraid, not aggressive, waiting for instruction. "Because they were brought," she said. "By whom?" "By yours." He took 1 step closer. Mira did not move. "You know what I am," he said. "I know what the priest calls you." "And what do you call me?" "I haven't called you anything. You haven't given me a name." For the first time something flickered in his face. Not anger. Something else. Something that almost looked like surprise. "Most people are afraid by now," he said. "I'm not most people. I can see that." He moved again, but not toward her. He moved toward the hearth, slowly, the way you move when you do not want to startle a deer. He stopped at the basket where Lev was sleeping. He looked down. He looked at the small wound along the pup's throat. the one that had closed already, the one Mira had cleaned out twice, and his face did something Mira had also never seen on a face before. It went soft just for an instant, and then it went hard again, and the hardness this time was not for her. "You closed this one," he said. "Yes." "How?" "Honey. Yarrow. A clean cloth. Heat. And the others. The same. They were not all the same wound." "I know." He turned to look at her again, and his black eyes had something in them now that they had not had before. He was, Mira realized, looking at her the way she had looked at her first pup. Not with hunger, not with fear, with the simple, careful attention of a person trying to figure out what kind of creature he had in his hands. "You should be afraid of me," he said. "I know I should. And you aren't." "No." "Why?" She thought about it. She owed him a true answer, and she gave him one. "Because you sent them," she said. "If you wanted me dead, you would have come to my door, not theirs. You sent 4 pups before you came. You wanted to see what I did with them. You wanted to see if I would turn them away. I didn't. So now you are here, and you are still not killing me, which means you still want to see what I do. And what I do is not afraid of you. So I am not going to start now." He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "My name is Alexei." "Mira." "I know." He stayed only a little longer. He looked at each of the pups in turn. He did not touch them. He stopped at the door and looked back once, and Mira thought he was going to say something else. But he didn't. He simply opened the door, which she had latched, and walked back out into the dark. The door closed. The latch dropped on its own. Mira sat on the stool until the fire burned down to embers. Then she got up and put another log on it, and she fed the pups, and she went to bed. That night, she dreamed of nothing. In the morning, there was a 5th pup on her step. This one wasn't wounded. This one had been brought with a small leather pouch tied gently to its neck. Inside the pouch was a single dried thyme leaf, which was the herb she used most often, and which she was almost out of. He had been listening. He had been listening the whole time. She put the new pup down with the others, and she laughed once, out loud, in her empty kitchen. If you're still with me on this one, do me a small favor and tap that subscribe button. The rest of the story is where it really turns, and I want to make sure you're here for the ending. She named the new pup Andre, after the priest, just to see whether the priest would laugh or weep when she told him. Alexei came back 9 times over the next month. He never knocked. The door simply opened, and there he was. Sometimes he stayed for an hour, sometimes for a single sentence. He did not eat. He did not drink. He did not sit. He stood by the hearth or by the window, and he watched Mira work. She kept working. She kept the pups fed and clean. She kept the salve stocked. She walked down to the village twice for thread and flour, and both times she felt eyes on her on the path. But the eyes were not the priest's, and they were not the women's. They were eyes from higher up, from the trees. He was watching her walk down. He was watching her walk back. She did not say anything about it. He talked, slowly after a while. He told her his wolves were the only family he had on this side of the mountain. He told her the mothers had been killed by men, not by him. There were hunters in the next valley who paid well for wolf pelts, and the mothers had been the largest and the boldest, and so they had been first. He told her this with a flat voice, as though he had said it to himself many times and never out loud. "That's why you brought them to me," she said. "I did not know what else to do with them. You could have raised them yourself. I cannot feed them." "Why not?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because what I would feed them is not what they should grow up on." She nodded slowly. She did not ask him to say more. He left that night without saying goodbye. The hunters came 2 evenings later. There were 6 of them. They came up the path at dusk, the way men come who do not expect to be questioned. Mira heard them first, not their boots but the dogs. 3 lean, scarred dogs on lead, the kind men keep for tracking. The dogs were already barking when they came around the last switchback. "Anya," inside the cottage, came to his feet. Tomas stood beside him. Lev and Sasha and little Andrei pressed themselves against the bench. Mira opened the door. She did not pick up anything. She did not even put on her shawl. The leader of the men was a broad, gray-bearded man she had seen once in the valley market. He had a long iron-tipped spear across his shoulder. The 5 others carried short bows or axes. Behind them, in the failing light, she could see the silhouettes of 2 more men with torches, waiting at the bend. "Step aside, woman," the leader said. "No, we've come for the wolves." "There are no wolves here. There are pups. Pups grow up. So do children. Do you kill those too?" The leader spat onto her stone step. "Don't be clever. Step aside." "No." He looked past her into the firelight. He could see Anya. He could see all 4 of the older pups now, lined up behind her in a ragged half-circle, ears flat, low to the ground. His face went hard. "You've been raising a pack. I've been raising orphans. They're his. We know whose they are. We know what kind of mother sends pups to a woman like you, and we know what kind of woman takes them in. The priest told us everything." So the priest had spoken after all. Mira had wondered. "Then you know," she said, "that if you come through this door, I am the smallest of the problems you will have tonight." The leader laughed. He actually laughed. He set the butt of his spear on the stone and leaned on it. "That thing has not come down off the high ridge in 12 years, he said. "He won't come for one peasant woman and her dog pile. Won't he? No. So I'll make this simple. Step aside, or we cut through you." Mira did not step aside. The leader nodded to one of his men. The man drew his bow. He drew it slow, the way men do when they expect a woman to flinch. Mira did not flinch. The bow came to full draw, and the arrowhead lined up on her chest, and the leader said calmly, "Last chance." What happened next, Mira told no one for the rest of her life. The man with the bow was lifted off the ground. He did not see what lifted him. None of them did. He was simply there, and then he was 4 feet in the air, and then he was on his back on the stones, and the bow was in 2 pieces beside him, and his arm was bent backward in a way arms do not bend. He did not even have time to scream. The leader turned. He raised his spear. He did not get to bring it down. Alexei was between him and Mira before the spear reached its highest point. He did not look at the men. He looked only at her, over his shoulder, just for an instant, and his face asked her one single question. She understood the question. She shook her head once. "Don't kill them," she said. He turned back to the leader of the hunters. He took the spear out of the man's hands the way a parent takes a knife from a child. He snapped the iron tip off with 2 fingers. He dropped the broken spear on the stone. "Take your wounded man," he said, "and go down. Tell the valley that this cottage and everything in it is mine. Tell them the wolves on this mountain are mine. Tell them the woman in this doorway is mine. And tell them that the next ones who come up this path will not be sent back." The leader stared. "And tell the priest," Alexei said more quietly, "that she said she would not need a defense. She didn't." The hunters went down. The dogs went with them, tails low, whining. The man with the broken arm was dragged between 2 of them, his boots scraping over the stones. The torches at the bend went out. The mountain was quiet again. Mira stood in the doorway, and the cold of the night reached her at last, and she shivered once, and she said the only thing she could think to say, "Thank you." Alexei did not turn around. "You said yes to all of them," he said. "I did not know what to do with that." He turned then. His black eyes found hers in the firelight. "I still don't." The next morning Mira swept the stones. There was blood on them. Not much, but enough that the rain wouldn't take it for a week if she didn't. She got down on her knees with a bucket and a brush, and she scrubbed the stone until the dawn light came up over the ridge and the cottage was hers again. The pups came out to watch her work. Lev and Sasha were big enough now that they couldn't fit through the door together anymore. Anya sat on the top step with his ears forward, looking down the path the way a guard dog looks at a road. Tomas tried to climb into the bucket. She lifted him out 3 times before he gave up. It was a long morning. It was also a quiet one. She didn't expect Alexei to come back that day. She didn't know whether she expected him to come back at all. He had said the words he had said in front of the hunters, and she did not know if those words had been for them or for her. He was the kind of man, she had learned, who put things into the air and let other people decide what to do with them. She decided to let them stand. The valley did not send any more men. The priest did not come back either, although on the 7th day after the hunters were turned away she heard the small distant sound of the village bell ringing for matins, and she stood in her doorway and listened, and she thought of Father André in his cassock and his blessing thumb, and she said a small word for him that wasn't quite a prayer. Word of what had happened did spread, of course. Things like that always do. But the version that spread was the kind of story that frightens men into leaving a thing alone, and that was what Mira wanted. The path up to her cottage stayed empty. The footpath down to the village stayed open for her, but no one came up it now except the women on the days when a labor went wrong, and even they did not stay long, and they did not look at her wolves. Her wolves. She used the word now. She had stopped pretending they were pups. Alexei came back on a night in early winter. The first snow had just begun. It was the dry kind, the kind that comes down small and powdery and lies on the stones like flour. The door opened the way it always did, without sound, and he was there, in the same long dark coat with the same not quite wind-blown hem, and Mira was at her kitchen table grinding dried thyme into a wooden bowl. She looked up. She didn't say anything. He set something down on the table in front of her. It was a pup, a very small one, white almost, the smallest she had seen. Its eyes were not yet open. Its breathing was so light she had to lean down to be sure it was breathing at all. "The mother is gone," he said. "How?" "Old. Not hunters. Just old." "And the father?" "The father is here." Mira looked up at him. She had never asked. She had assumed the wolves were not his in any way that mattered. She saw now that they were his in every way that mattered. He had not been bringing her the children of strangers. He had been bringing her his own. She put her hand around the pup's small ribcage. She felt the heart inside it, fast and small, the way a sparrow's heart goes when you cup it. She felt the breath move under her thumb. She felt the warmth, which was not a great warmth, but it was a warmth. "What's her name?" she said. "She doesn't have one yet." "Why not?" "Because I wanted to see what you would call her." Mira looked at the pup for a long time. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about the chest at the foot of her bed, with its 43 small bottles in their slanted hand. She thought about the women in the village. She thought about Father André, walking down the switchbacks with his cassock moving in the wind. She thought about the hunters on the stones, and the man with the broken arm, and the spear coming down and not coming down. She thought about a kitchen floor and a wet, shivering thing, and a door that opened by itself, and a voice that said you said yes to all of them. "I did not know what to do with that." "Hope," she said. "Hope. It's an old name in my grandmother's chest. It's the one she didn't give to anyone." Alexei nodded slowly. He did not leave that night. He stayed by the fire until dawn on the bench Tomas usually slept on, and Tomas slept on the floor instead and did not seem to mind. The new pup slept on Myra's lap, against the small bowl of thyme, and Anya watched the door, and the snow came down outside, and the cottage on the high ridge of stone, which had been alone for 9 winters and 3 months, was not alone anymore. That was who she was. That was who he had needed, and not known he needed, until his wolves had told him in the only way they knew how. One small ribcage at a time. One yes after another until there were no more no's left in the world. She did not turn a single one away. Not the pups. Not the wolf. Not the man. And the mountain which had always been wrong was at last exactly right.